for joining us tonight. Welcome to our 10th celebratory lecture for the 50th anniversary of UTSA. It's been a very special series that UTSA has planned around celebrating the contributions that our faculty are making every day and connecting closer to San Antonio. And so we really appreciate you being a part of this celebration with us. I'd like to express special thanks to the UTSA Flute Ensemble, who's directed by Dr. Rachel Wolf. It's a lovely and inspiring presentation this evening. We really enjoyed their work. Also, a big thanks to True Flavors for providing the catering. Yes. And of course, the Southwest School of Arts for allowing us to use their facilities this evening. Truly inspiring facilities, I think, that's going to really match some of the things that we learned today from Bill. So I have the pleasure of introducing one of our distinguished alums and professor in our College of Architecture, Construction, and Planning. Annalie Diego is an interior designer, artist, professor, and program coordinator for our interior design program in the College of Architecture, Construction, and Planning at UTSA. She is also a UTSA alumnus who graduated magna cum laude with a BS in Interior Design in 2008 and a master's in architecture in 2011. And she has also earned a historic preservation certificate through our programs. In addition to her teaching and coordinating activities, Annalie's most recent work includes the interior design of the common areas at the 68 at Hemisphere Apartments and the interior renovation for the basement at the Maverick building downtown. So please help me welcome Annalie Diego.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Browning, for the introduction before the introduction. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight's speaker, who happens to be one of the most influential mentors in my design career. I know I speak on behalf of all historic preservation students and alumni at UTSA that Dr. Bill Dupont has had a great impact on the way we perceive historic preservation and the way we understand how vital it is for us to promote survival of cultural identity through our individual design explorations. Dr. Dupont's lecture this evening will present lessons learned from around the world as we work to conserve the unique heritage values of San Antonio. Dr. Dupont established the UTSA Center for Cultural Sustainability in 2011, considering the heritage of people as a core element of a sustainable future. His projects have included evaluations of historic buildings, feasibility plans to save living heritage, support to city leaders and community groups grappling with development and growth issues in heritage zones, and designing conservation objectives for internationally significant cultural resources. In addition to all of this, and to teaching architecture, design studios, and historic preservation, he leads a U.S. technical team supporting Cuban preservation efforts at Museo Ernest Hemingway in Havana. Dr. Dupont is the incumbent of San Antonio Conservation Society endowed professorship at UTSA as well. And in 2018, he was named a Texas Preservation Hero, also led by the San Antonio Conservation Society. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dupont as he presents A Resilient Heritage, Designing San Antonio's Future to Preserve Our Past.
Okay, glad you're all here tonight. Let me turn on my... Okay, thanks for coming out. It's a little bit rainy tonight, and you got a good turnout. For those of you who are standing in the back, there's seats if you want to make your way to the seats anytime. Please go ahead. I'm used to things happening while I'm talking, and we'll roll with it if you need to do that. So I want to try and tell you some stories tonight because I think those are fun and interesting. And as I was thinking about what knits all these stories together, it's really UTSA. And this is a story about faculty and students working together in explorations on how to design with respect for heritage. And that's what we work on in our Department of Architecture and in my endeavors on the research projects. I'm always trying to find ways, better ways to make design choices that respect heritage. And right now we have some real challenges in the world with regard to the frequency and intensity of natural disasters. And in our region of Texas, we have a lot of population growth that's impacting us. And there can be negative consequences from these things. And so we need to increase our resilience, our capacity to survive. And so that's been a real trend in my research and in our education and with my colleagues. So when I show you these things, I also want you to remember that I'm not just one person. We work on these things together. And you're going to see people in the pictures, and I may not identify all of them, but they're all there. And a lot of you in the audience, actually, have been supporters of work that we do at the university. And for that, I thank you very much. So, let me see here. Double check my notes. So, I've got... So the big message tonight, people are what make a place truly sustainable. In the face of natural disasters and rapid change, we can proactively design to retain wisdom of past generations and promote survival of cultural identity. That's what I'm talking about. So, I'm going to tell you what's informed my opinions and how to conserve the unique heritage of San Antonio, which I'm honored to have the opportunity to do on several of my projects. And these are great opportunities that we don't take lightly. Some of the projects that I've been able to pursue just in the past 2 or 3 years have been the greatest things I've done in my career, the things that I've always wanted to do. And UTSA gives me those opportunities, and I get to be part of it with all of you and with all of the students to make a difference, to make an impact. And that's what we're trying to do, and I'm going to show you how. So, by the way, this is Calle Obispo, which is in La Habana Vieja, Old Havana, the World Heritage Site, where I do get to travel to frequently for work on the Museo Ernest Hemingway. So cultural sustainability, just to get the definition out of the way, I call it the continuity of the cultural systems of human existence. And so when we look at cultural sustainability, that's what it concerns, is these systems. What are the cultural systems? How are they continuous? And how do we help them perpetuate? People have heritage identities and values that bind them to places. So I'm an architect. I'm not a typical architect. You think architects, we design houses or airports, and that's not what I do. What I do is heritage conservation, and what I do is look for these heritage identities, and then I connect them to places, and I figure out how to help make those places more resilient, have greater survivability, how to help them sustain and endure. And they change. Change is inevitable. And it's going to happen, and it's going to be better when things change. In fact, when I used to work for the National Trust for Historic Preservation as their chief architect before I joined UTSA, and people were very upset at one time. We had a big staff meeting about a demolition that the National Trust was actually supporting because it was a mitigation that allowed the favorable saving of a building, but another building was going to be lost. And the staff were upset at the leadership of the organization, which I wasn't part of the leadership. I was next rung down. And I raised my hand and said to the group, I've never worked on a project where we didn't demolish something. And that's true. Even in a restoration of a fine museum quality restoration, we're going to demolish something. So change is inevitable. And Mother Nature is going to do it if we don't. So we're going to need to intervene and take action so that we can sustain the heritage that we love. So a question that I always have when I come to any place that's new to me, and San Antonio was relatively new to me when I arrived here in 2005. I've been doing some project work here back from 1996 with a man named Walter Mathis, whose house has become a National Trust site called Villa Finale. And I wanted to figure out how the place came to be as it is. So I'm exploring around the town, trying to figure out, why does it look this way? Why are, why are there farmlands to the south, and why is there all this development up to the north, and where's the railroad tracks, and what laid out this city? How did the center become the center? And of course, I understood some of the laws of the Indies for the way the Spanish colonial cities are laid out, but it didn't all make sense because the streets weren't quite straight, and there was a lot of crookedness, and everybody had a story about why the streets weren't straight. And so I looked at, well, that doesn't, some of the silly stories people would say were obviously just silly stories. And so it's about the acequias, the waterways. And because the place is flat, the waters follow the topographic contours to flow gently downhill, and all the land needs access to the water. Everybody needs a piece of the water to live and for all these various purposes. So San Antonio's cultural landscape is laid out according to these acequia systems. And it always comes back to that. And one of the things, as I'm walking around, and I went to take a picture of this is a dam, by the way. This is the Espada Dam, and it's it's the only acequia system in San Antonio continuously in operation. And I went to take a picture of it from the other side, which is a cemetery. I think it's called Mission Heritage Cemetery or something. And I'm standing on a person's gravesite as I'm taking the picture, because that was the best spot to get the shot I wanted. And so it turned out it wasn't such a good shot. But so to be respectful of the person whose grave I was standing on, I'm thinking to myself as I'm taking the shot, well, I'm going to read this person's name out loud to myself, just as a sign of respect. So I turn around and look at the ground, and it's hold on. Sorry. Oh, no, it's Ford. O'Neill Ford, right? Yeah. So I never met him. He passed in the '80s. So it's O'Neill Ford's grave, and Wanda, his wife, is buried next to him, and they're facing the Espada Dam, where they sit. Susan Snow is nodding her head. She knows this. So O'Neill Ford recognized these acequias had that importance in San Antonio, so much that he had himself buried facing the Espada Dam. So when we think about what motivates us in heritage conservation, there are certain values that are common across all places. And I've been fortunate enough to give lectures in Turkey and in Iraq. These are pictures from Erbil, Iraq, where I was with my colleague Angela Lombardi, who is also here tonight, back in 2013-14. And I asked them the same question that I always ask my students every year, which is, what do you value about this place? I mean, what is the tangible benefit that you get from heritage? And when the answers come back, they are the same, no matter where I'm asking them. And we could, play the game and write things down, but you need to pause for about 10 minutes to reflect on it and give yourself the opportunity to write it. But they always fall into different categories, and they always include educational values, political values, scientific values, social values, and they're not just historical values or aesthetic values. And so these are the things that motivate us, and these are the things I always touch on when I'm working on my projects with my students, and I'm trying to determine what is it we're really trying to save, because it's not just the place. We're actually trying to save the reason why the place is important. And that's the core value that we want to get at. And that's very important when we're thinking about heritage resilience, because the resilience of the building is one thing, but the resilience of the community and the people has to do with why those people think that building is important. And it won't necessarily be what I think. So I have to figure it out, and you only figure it out by asking. So with the students, as we go around from place to place, we rely upon the kindness and generosity of individuals to tell us what motivates them. What are their values? What is it that they see as important about their place, that is their heritage? And so I love to get students out of San Antonio. We can get them out of Texas. We do that a lot with all of our undergraduates in the College of Architecture all do the signature experience, and they go to Urbino. And the grad students, we travel as often as we can. we've gone to Mesa Verde, to Pueblo of Acoma, to Santa Fe, and when we do that, I don't just go alone, I engage people, like Teresa Pascual, who's a member of the Acoma people. And then we get access to cool places, and the students can understand what it is that really deeply motivates and what are the core reasons for why we're preserving things, so that that becomes the basis for making decisions about heritage conservation. And the man on the right, Pat Taylor, works with a group called Cornerstones in Santa Fe, and he's extremely knowledgeable about how to care for adobe structures. And he's very patient, and he'll take the time and volunteer and give his time to our UTSA students in such a meaningful way. And at Lerma's nightclub, where we were just, some of the students in the room will recognize themselves in this picture, right? With the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center that owns the Lerma's nightclub. And they're in the process of saving it. Now, some of you may know the story of it. It was threatened with demolition, and now it's a success story. And the reason for that has to do with the people that were motivated to save it, and then some professionals that agreed to help out. They got a lot of volunteer effort, and many people played a part, and they've been pushing on this for a long time. It's now in construction. It's going to be opening in phases, but within the next 10 months, they're going to have some of it open, which is a great success for Lerma's nightclub, and for the West Side, and for the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center, and for Conjunto Music, because that's this is the place that connects with the Conjunto Music, which is the intangible cultural heritage that we also have to be aware of. Because although I'm an architect, we don't just save buildings and places, we're also saving intangible cultural traditions and heritage and beliefs and spirituality, because those are values too that people have. And we have to know what they are in order to be able to protect them and save them. Okay, so presently we're working with the Twin Sisters Dance Hall, and Jonelle Haas is our best friend for helping on this, and also a great ally, Charles John, who's in the back of the room, a member of Texas Dance Hall Preservation Board. And we're getting out there on a regular basis, and we're working with them. This is students volunteering and face painting, and they're here. They can tell you how the face painting went. They had a great time, I think. And students sketching and drawing, and us visiting, and us laying on the ground and pointing at the ceiling, because Mr. Zappi said that was fun to do. And so I said, well, then let's do it. And so we all did. And, or just goofing around. This was a previous semester out in Belleville, and trying to understand what motivates people to want to preserve Texas dance halls. And what are they all about? Why are they here? And what were these communities? What has become of them? How did this place come to be the way it is? Why do people value it? We know the answers to those questions, and then we have the keys to unlock how to save them. So there. A few more shots just to show us getting out and around. And this class is entirely experiential, so to, I think, the initial confusion of the students in the class, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, they didn't quite get when I said we were not going to meet in the classroom, that we were not going to meet in the classroom. So we've only been out in the field. We have an office that we gather in from time to time, but there is no class time. And I haven't added up the hours, but soon they'll have had enough of me, I think, because it's been a lot of time together. But we're getting a lot done, and we're going to be out there tomorrow and showing some of the projects that we've been working on, and we're having fun and learning a lot. So now, when we think about the things that we protect, and projects I've worked on in the past, this is the President Lincoln's Cottage National Monument, one that I use as a learning tool, and we worked on it when I was at the National Trust. And what's valuable there is what I call the Lincoln Shiver. And Lincoln lived in this cottage for 3 or 4 years, and it was his sort of a sanctuary or retreat. And it's the only, other than the White House, the only place that's connected with Lincoln as a sitting president. And the White House, as some of you history buffs may know, was completely gutted out in the middle of the 20th century to be modernized. So the Lincoln bedroom is actually not the Lincoln bedroom, it's a recreation. This cottage actually has a real Lincoln bedroom. And nobody knew about it until roughly 1996 or 7, when historians suddenly started talking to preservationists and saying, you know, this place exists. It's still there in Washington, D.C. And so it became a National Trust site, and I got to work on it for quite some time. So this mantle here was a piece of marble that Lincoln touched. I don't know how many times, but he certainly touched it. He put his elbow on it. He read books in this room. It's a fact. And so people would walk up to it and touch it and shiver. Visceral spiritual reaction to a connection to the great man. And I was mystified by this when I saw it. So what's going on here? You know, because I guess I'm jaded. I don't see ghosts either in the old buildings. And so people were connecting to Lincoln's spirit. And this was a value. So I said, well, we gotta protect this thing and save it. You know, this is important. So we measure it, we document. In the back of the room is Dr. Skarmeas, who worked on this project with me when we were at the National Trust. He in private practice long ago. And he was responsible for overseeing some of these drawings and the construction project. And saved this building. And here it's protected during construction. And there it is in the finished product. And so now people can still touch it because that's part of the program. Because we said at the outset, now it's going to be okay for people to still touch the mantle, right? That's got to be part of the long-term concept here of the educational program. Even though it means that we're using up history. Because you know every time you touch something, it wears it down. So we use history deliberately. And that's what this is about, is making choices about how to use history deliberately for the benefit of the people that want to gain from it. So now, in Ernest Hemingway's house in Havana, he lived there the last 22 years of his life. Most people associate him with Key West. What's there is a place of creative inspiration, and that's what needs to be preserved. So we're trying to allow people to access an intellectual idea of Hemingway as a literary artist where he drew his creative inspiration from. And he chose to be here at this place and to write at a particular typewriter in a particular room and to experience Havana in a particular way. And that's the creative inspiration that he drew that now visitors can find again. So it's opening up that access to that value, which is what's important here. So that's what has to be sustained. And we're going to be working on this in December. I'm bringing a student there, and we're going to be helping them restore the house again. It's been ravaged by termites, and we're going to have to do something about that. But always we're trying to keep that intellectual access into Hemingway's place of creative inspiration. Now back to San Antonio, we have a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and what's important about this site is not just the buildings, it's the people. It's about buildings, yes. It's about cultural landscapes, yes. And it's about the living heritage of people. Without the living heritage, this does not make it as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The architecture alone is not enough to carry this to be one of the greatest heritage sites in the world. When you combine the intact set of buildings with all of what makes San Antonio unique as San Antonio, then it has the heritage to be World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage caliber, which is the highest designation that we can get. So that's really important to keep in mind, and what this means is that when we think about the neighborhoods around the missions and the people that live in those neighborhoods, people like Teresa Ibanez, who's got the black hat on in that picture, who's does the Friends of Mission of San Jose, the neighborhood group, neighborhood support group. They're trying to preserve what they value about the place. It's not that there can't be change, or there won't be change, or there can't be some growth, but there has to be controls, and there has to be some way to keep the people that live there from being displaced. And the city has gotten on board. Shannon Miller's here. Where are you, Shannon? They've got tons of programs. The World Heritage Office has got tons of programs where they're working really hard, and not just in the buffer zone of the missions, to make it possible for people to have a choice to stay in their historic districts. And in this case, it's a World Heritage Buffer Zone, so that they have that option. People will still be free to come and go, but at least they won't be displaced if we can avoid it. It's a difficult thing to do because it's more of an economic battle than a preservation battle. But we all want to support it and try to make it work. So heritage isn't always pretty. It isn't always smooth. It isn't always in agreement, in accord with everyone. It can be contested. And we see this in the news. 8 people arrested. One of them's here in the room. For demolition of Univision. It's a very sad story. And the outcome of it remains sad because the building is gone and the memory of what Univision stood for was erased from the San Antonio landscape. It's a terrible loss. Out of it came good things. The city now has a cultural historian, so that's a plus. But this is contested heritage, and there's winners and losers. And that's just how it goes in our world. And we learn from it, and we try and do better. Gentrification, is it a growing problem in San Antonio? This was the Mission Trails Mobile Home Park when our mayor, Julian Castro, at that time was mayor, created a task force on gentrification to figure out what can we do about this issue. Many good things came of it, and those programs are now bearing fruit, and people are working to try to deal with this displacement issue. St. John's Seminary reuse. This is another program that was extremely controversial. Good things are coming of it now. Some of the historic buildings that were very, very valuable are being preserved, and Charles John is working on that in the back of the room. And it's still, though, a tension in progress. And these tensions exist, and we have to recognize them and face them openly and honestly, and talk about them so that we can learn from them. And then the Conjunto Club, the Lermas, which is a big success story, was of course threatened, and now it's saved. So the resilience comes when we can understand what it is we're trying to protect. So one of the things we're lucky enough to be doing right now is working on best practices of care for the San Antonio missions. And that's a project we're doing with the National Park Service. And it's mostly about tangible heritage, but it will include the intangible as well to a certain degree. The National Park Service mostly is obligated to take care of the buildings. They have visitors that are involved in recreation, and so we'll be worried about that too. And the best practices will of course include the people coming together to talk about how the missions are going to be cared for. This is a wonderful thing, though, that our students and our faculty get to work on this sort of project. We're very fortunate to have the missions in San Antonio. Now, a great new project, and this is the last thing I'm going to bring up tonight. We're going on schedule. This is good. Building a Sacred Places Heritage Network for Disaster Resilience in the Texas Gulf Coast region. It's a long title, but it's a really great project, and we're thrilled that we got an award from the Texas Historical Commission to do this project. Out of the Hurricane Harvey relief fund that the federal government pushed to the state of Texas, some of it was carved off to the Texas Historical Commission, which is our state historic preservation office, and they opened up a grant application round for this to give away $10 million, and they mostly wanted to take care of property that had been damaged by the hurricane to fix it where it was broken and repair it. But they also said that projects could apply for planning. And of course, that's where we saw that opportunity to address what people were concerned about, which is, what are we going to do when it happens again? How are we going to be ready? How are we going to make our buildings more resilient? What if my building wasn't hurt, but it might be hurt next time? How can our community recover faster? How can we do this better? Let's not just wait for it to happen to us again. And so my colleagues and I, we looked for what's the hook, the thread, that we can pull something together so that we can make an impact and help this issue of enhancing and improving disaster resilience of heritage buildings. And we ran through a number of options. We thought about schools, we thought about residences, and we came upon sacred places, and we all agreed that sacred places was a great vehicle for doing this kind of work because they're anchors in their community, they're trusted by the people of the community, they're generally large, clear span buildings like the Coates Chapel we're standing in that have heavy masonry walls that can perhaps be made more resilient, or we can figure out how to help them in that regard on a technical basis. And then they can also become information conduits that can repeat the information again and again from a trusted source if we can give them the right information. Because what we found since the hurricanes that hit New Orleans, I think, was the real watershed turning moment, when people realized they couldn't trust the federal government to rebuild after a hurricane. And that's just the way things are. And people are now, and it happened in Texas too, when FEMA came around, people were saying, well, gosh, I thought I was going to get some money, or I thought I was going to get some help, and I'm not getting these things that I thought I was going to get. I got to do it myself. We got to figure out how to come together as a community and do this ourselves. And that's where we thought Sacred Places is going to work. So we called Bob Yeager in Philadelphia, the executive director of Partners for Sacred Places, whom I've known for a long time from when I used to live and work in Philly. And he said, Bill, that's a fabulous idea. Let's do this together. And we got the National Trust to partner with us. We got AIA Houston, and we got the Galveston Historical Society and the Victoria Preservation Group and preservationists in Harris County. And we said, we can get into these most impacted counties. There's dozens of heritage churches out there. They all need help. Some of them were damaged, some of them weren't. We're going to make this heritage network, this peer association group, so they can all share information with each other. So now we've got an immediate way to release this information. So we're really excited about this. We're just getting started. We talk about it a lot. We haven't staffed up fully. The grant award isn't signed yet. Hopefully we'll be going full speed by January. But this is an exciting new direction for us. And we're really thrilled about it. So, and colleagues Sandeep and Angela in the back of the room there are both working on this. And Sadef, right? Our department chair. So it's really fun. It's like talking to a family here. This is great. So anyway, this is just what I want to end with. I mean, I've got this fabulous opportunity that UTSA is letting me make an impact here in San Antonio. There isn't a better place in the nation right now to be doing what I do. As a heritage preservation professional, as a professional architect, with the strength of our San Antonio Conservation Society, with Prince Michael here in the front row, and an old friend from when we worked on projects together in the Chicago region back in the 90s. And we've got so much going for us. Yeah. And it's great. I mean, I love it. So I just want to close by saying, let's see. So, fast change, the rapid development or disasters from natural or man-made. These things strain the existing built environment. They increase vulnerability to disasters and decrease resilience to sustain, survive, or recover. On the positive side, greater resilience of heritage strengthens our communities, increases respect for cultural identity, and deepens our understanding of each other as humans. Yes, we can proactively design for a future that retains the wisdom of past generations, promotes continuity of heritage, and increases resilience of cultural resources. We are doing it at UTSA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. It was really inspirational. I have to say, in my time getting to work with you and getting to know people in the College of Architecture, Construction, and Planning, the type of outreach and community engagement that these amazing professors are able to achieve and the care that they give back to San Antonio is truly inspirational. So thank you for everything that you do and really enjoyed your talk today. Thank you very much. Now, We're going to have some more time here, and I believe that Bill is going to stick around so you can answer some questions and have time to talk to him some more. So please do not leave. I do want to say a couple more things. We are closing out the year very soon with our 50th anniversary series. So the second to the last lecture in this series is only 2 weeks away. It's going to be a professor of microbiology, Carl Close, and he'll be at the San Antonio Botanical Gardens November 12th to talk about what's bugging us, the rise of antibiotic-resistant superbugs. It's going to be great. Please refer to your programs that you received today to see more details on the remaining 2 talks, and we hope that you will join us because I think, as you can see, there's a lot to be gained from talking to some of these great professors at UTSA. So please enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you again for coming.